keep rolling. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the BC AdventureSmart Survive Outside program. My name is Sandra, and I'm the director of the program. We're so glad to have you here today, and we're grateful to be joining you from the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, uniquely the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation. We have a lot of information to share about search and rescue, about your adventures, and how you can be safe and help reduce the number and severity of search and rescue calls in the province of BC. So let's get started. The AdventureSmart program is a national program that started in British Columbia 18 years ago. The whole idea behind the program is to increase awareness, engage with outdoor enthusiasts, and inform you about best practices for outdoor recreation, for all those hikes and bikes and paddles and everything else you like to do outside, so we can reduce the number and severity of search and rescue calls in BC and right across the country. Everywhere that these AdventureSmart programs are shared, messages are shared on social media, in schools, at events. We all want you to encourage great behavior by following the 3 T's: trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. We're going to jump into each one and describe it in more detail. Trip planning is essential to make sure that every single outing you do, big or small, is safe, and that you reach your destination, which is always home. We've broken it into 4 simple steps here. We want you to plan your travel route and navigation, know the terrain and the conditions for where you're going, always check the weather, and leave a comprehensive trip plan with a trusted emergency contact. And we'll talk a little bit about that further into the program. Planning your travel route and navigation is key. It's one of the most important phases of the first T. And the whole idea is not to get lost, not to need search and rescue. They're there if you do need them, but we're trying to set yourself up for success. Decide on which trail that you can do based on its difficulty, but also compare that to your experience, your ability, and the time you have in the daylight, to do your adventure, to do your hike. Know your limits and plan within it. There could be a group of us that head out and we have different experiences, different certifications, different energy levels, different fitness levels. So we need to plan that and know the limits of our group and individually. So we should check in with ourselves and each other throughout the adventure. Make sure you're out there and doing this activity within the estimated time you've allotted, and compare that to the distance on the trail and how does that fit in with your physical fitness, your group dynamics, and you want to conclude this before sunset, ideally. We do a lot of data collection here in the province of BC, and we know that through the search and rescue incident summaries, there's 3 top reasons for search and rescue in the province, and getting lost and disoriented is the second most common reason for search and rescue. So if we can think about how can I avoid getting lost and or disoriented, you'll help reduce the severity of a call. Knowing the terrain and conditions and paying close attention to that trail difficulty, we have a little comparison here that will allow you to go through a little scenario with me to see how we can compare these trails against our abilities and if we're able to do this. And how does it look in this level of detail in trip planning? We can connect our physical fitness to this, our mental strength, the technical difficulty of the trail. So let's jump in and do a little comparison together. So the Burnaby Lake Trail in the top left-hand corner, it gives you the length. It's about 10 kilometers and estimated about 2.5 hours to do that. The middle picture is that surface. It's well groomed, well taken care of, and it looks accessible. Over on the right-hand side, it gives you a map there with the distance and the elevation gain. And that's good information to look at and the detail at the very minimum that you want to assess. Now let's compare that to Sigurd Peak. This one's 14 kilometers, so it's only 4 more kilometers. However, it's almost 8 hours to do this one. And the middle picture shows you a completely different terrain surface, technical difficulty, route finding, a level of skill needed completely different than the Burnaby Lake Trail. And then we pop over to the bottom right and you can see the contour lines on the map. If you understand what that means, it shows you the elevation gain and loss in that terrain. There's the distance and the elevation gain. That's key. That elevation gain between Burnaby Lake and Sigurd Peak is a big caveat here So is the trail surface. So these are the details that we're trying to encourage you to look up before your adventure. Checking that weather and understanding how much of it should we check. Should we just look out the window? Should we just check the app on our phone? We want you to do this every time before you go on those adventures. If it's an adventurous dog walk, if you're a dog walker, or a backcountry adventure, a mountain biker, whatever you like to do out there, you're checking this before you go. Looking at temperatures, how that varies throughout the day from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. in our example. There's a couple of different degrees in there, but it also shows that it's pouring rain at 6 p.m. So the likelihood of precipitation hits around dinner time. And so if it was me, I would love to have my activity done by 5. I don't really care to be in a 90% downpour of rain. And this is the level of detail we want you to check in. So you're looking at wind speed as well, precipitation amounts, and sunset time. Taking that sunset time into consideration so that we're back and down to the car, home, on our way home by sunset. It helps you, it helps search and rescue in case there needs to be a call. The daylight will help them and you. On a general rule, on a clear day, the temperature decreases by about 10 degrees for every 1,000 meters that you gain in elevation. We all know it gets colder as we gain elevation, but that's a good general rule to keep in mind, especially in the spring and fall when we head out there and it's different temperatures, different climate at a lower elevation, and then we gain that elevation and it's considerably colder, limited visibility, possibly snow, and the surface that you're on could still be snow conditions. So paying close attention, especially in so many parts of our province in British Columbia where we have easy access to the backcountry, to higher elevations. We can be at sea level down at the beach and there's flowers coming up here in the spring, or we head up higher and it's still winter in the spring, and the same can be said for fall. So checking that weather, and now let's take that gain of elevation into consideration back to our comparison of our 2 hikes that we just talked about earlier. So applying that weather forecast, looking at the temperatures, precipitation, wind speed, amounts, and sunset. And now let's apply that elevation gain. So Sigurd Peak, we gained almost 2,000 meters in elevation gain here. So that will definitely be colder by quite a bit, so that we know that we need to pack those extra essentials, have those extra layers, be prepared for that colder temperature, and also maybe play some scenarios in your head. And what if at that higher elevation, 2,000 meters, that's where the incident happens. Let's say you twist an ankle and you need help from there. So now you're waiting at that elevation in those temperatures for a few hours, possibly the day, possibly into the evening. So that's what we're talking about, being prepared for that higher elevation for your activity, but also in case there's an emergency at that location. Let's talk about leaving a comprehensive trip plan with a trusted contact. And trusted is a key word here. In general, we want you to think about the 5 W's and the H. Why? Leaving why you're going. Am I hiking? Am I skiing? Am I foraging? Am I mountain biking? Am I heading out for a backcountry picnic? There's the why. When, include when you're going and when you expect to be back. Not just, okay, Natasha, I'm heading out for a hike. I'll be back this afternoon. Too vague. And then where. Give that specific information of where you're going and the route. Return, loop, that detail. What color of clothing are you wearing? Is it bright? Is it dark? What equipment do you have with you? And then leave the names and the contacts as well. That would be the who. And then the how. How are you getting to and from? Are you being dropped off? Have you taken transit? Are you driving your own vehicle? Is it just at one trailhead or 2 in case it's an access and an exit? These are the finer bits of all of your trip planning, and it can really help out search and rescue volunteers when they have this level of detail. They turn into investigators when a call happens, and the more information they can have, the better they'll be, and eventually you as well. A simple text will do. This also is one example of what a trip plan could look like. We use our phones so much for everything now, so a quick text could work. I have another example to show you that will help you even more as we get through the presentation. So here we go through the why, a little text time, just letting you know that I'm heading out for the hike in the mountains tomorrow. So this is going to the contact the day before. And then the when, we're including that information. When are you going and when do you expect to be back? We've got a time in here, a location, and a return time. So start time, finish time, and that location. The details of specifics on where, leaving from the Rubble Creek car park, we're going to walk up to the Garibaldi Lake campsite and return on the same trail. There's quite a bit of information in that piece for where. We're talking about clothing. So many of us wear natural colored clothing or dark clothing. Think about bright and bold when you're heading outdoors. Think yellows and blues, oranges. These are colors that are easier to spot for volunteers looking for you, search and rescue. So here it describes a favorite green top, a red jacket, and I've also packed my essentials. So that means something to my emergency contact. They've either adventured with me before and they know what those essentials mean to me and what I have in there, or I can list them as well. And we'll show you how you can do that simply in a minute. Who's with me? Who's in my group? Is it just myself? Hopefully not. We always recommend at least 3. 3 is great. If I get hurt, someone can take care of me. The next person can take care of communications. Here we've got 2 extra people. I'm going with John and Chrissy. I also use their phone number and contact information as backup contact in case for some reason my contact communication device, which we'll talk about soon, isn't working. So I have backup if there is reception. And then the how, state how we're getting to and from. Like I mentioned, what's that mode of transportation? And there's a little bit of extra information in here because if you don't get back to me, if you don't hear from me by a certain time, you can try and phone me. And if you don't hear from me, there's instructions to phone 911 by a certain time. So there's boundaries set here. We're not going to sit through a night or a few extra hours into the late evening in the dark waiting. We've been instructed as an emergency contact what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and who to contact. And 911 is always that number. Let's jump into the second T here, training. This can be described in so many ways, but nonetheless, however we describe it, it's continuous, it's ongoing. I know as a child, I learned how to use an axe from my dad. I was in charge of lighting the fire at home after work and school, stocking the wood box, and these things we learn as children growing up, we don't think of them as training. We're shown and taught, which is wonderful, skills that have boded well for me throughout my life. Or there's something certification based, first aid, bushcraft, wintertime would be avalanche skills training, or a mountain bike course that I took a few years ago. So it's continuous depending on the activity that you choose to do. We've divided it up into these sections. Activity specific skills training could be that mountain bike course that I mentioned. I just wanted to work on a few things. It was a girls' camp, it was great. Avalanche skills training would be activity specific. Bushcraft would be activity specific. Maybe map and compass. Maybe how to use the apps on your phone would be helpful if you really understand how certain apps work to your benefit. Physical fitness and training, that's ongoing. We're keeping fit, physically fit, training for the activities that we're choosing to do. If it's biking, hiking, paddling, different parts of our body need more concentration than others. Overall cardio fitness. I like to throw in here mental fitness as well and mental strength. That can come from the training, from the physical training, as we need to push through situations. It can come from being in an emergency situation and knowing how to assess, risk manage, and apply processes. That strength mentally can get us through either a tough hike or an emergency situation, and it helps us with communication and group dynamics as well. Navigation and route finding. That's a key one. We can head out there for a hike if so many of them are accessible, but if we don't know how to navigate that trail or that route, that doesn't help us at all. Let's say their markers aren't up to snuff in the park, or the signage is down, or it's shoulder season and the land managers don't have all the signs up yet, and it's up to you. It's always up to us individually to take that responsibility for our navigation. Wilderness first aid, that's a pretty basic one. Any first aid is going to help. Wilderness first aid is so great to take because it applies what we have in the forest to use for application, if it's moss as a cold pack or branches and boughs to help make a splint. There's so much to learn from a bushcraft or a wilderness first aid. And rescue and emergency training. Through an avalanche skills training, you'll learn a little bit more about the level of that for winter, which is good to think about for those people who love to go snowshoeing or put on their microspikes or travel in the shoulder seasons when the conditions still could bode challenging. Today is a little bit of that rescue training and that emergency preparedness, and you can take those to other levels as well. Now, all of those essentials that you put in your pack and we carry on us individually, we're all carrying these and packing everything you need to be prepared for those unexpected emergencies. They're unexpected, but we also plan for them by packing all of this and thinking of scenarios and talking about it as a group before your hike. You know, who's going to be in charge of communications if something happens? Check in, everybody's got all of these essentials in their pack. Who's in charge of first aid? Let's create a little scenario and talk about a what if situation. Nonetheless, we've got our basics, and then we always have season and sports specific gear. Those basics and those essentials that you'll take with you are listed here, and we often, when we do outdoor education, either at a trailhead or at a ski hill, at a community event, talking to the public, people sometimes say, oh, it seems like so much to carry. Oh, it's heavy. We wanted to give you a visual of what it can look like, and it's not that bad. It's doable. And here's the list. So let's think about a headlamp and flashlight. Don't forget the extra batteries. Headlamp is great because your hands are free. Fire making kit. That can be cotton balls dosed in Vaseline, sealed up in a Ziploc bag with some waterproof matches in another sealed container. The lint from your dryer is a fire starter. That's why we're taking it out. It's a hazard. Put that in a Ziploc bag too. There's some great fire starters. So that's in there as long as you know how to use that and create a fire safely. A signaling device, an emergency whistle, a shiny signaling card can help you signal a helicopter. First aid kit and pocket knife, knowing how to use them efficiently. Sun protection and an emergency blanket. Those ones we have checked off are shown in the picture, and they're easily stuffed in that red sack, which here in the picture shows you in the top left-hand corner, doesn't take up very much space. And then the rest of our essentials, extra food and water, at least 1 extra liter for emergencies, either in a hydration pack or in a water bottle. Extra warm clothing, waterproof, those layers, navigation and communication. So it's easily worn, carried, and packed as your basics. So this is your foundation of your pack every time you head outside. Now let's talk a little bit about sports specific. So we're going to add a few extra things here depending on what season it is and what activity you're choosing to do. But we're really fortunate in BC. The climate allows us at different elevations to almost play in 2 seasons at once. So we could ski one day, come down and go for a mountain bike ride. That can happen in the spring and the fall. So let's talk about what this might look like depending on the activity that you're choosing to do. Here's an idea with extras. There could be more than this. This just gives you an idea visually of a multi-day hike. So there's the essentials in the top left, our basics that we just talked about. And of course, you're going to take additional tent, sleeping bag. We've got purification for water, extra food, some gel packs, hat, gloves, those extra socks and layers. These are the extra seasonal and sports specific. And individually, you may have more. There's definitely more to this, but this just gives you an idea. And don't forget those personal extra pieces. Maybe you need to take medication with you, a puffer, for example, or literally medication you need to take and administer. Maybe you need to take your glasses to read your map, or to look at your phone a little bit closer to see things too. So don't forget about your personal essentials. Might be that favorite chocolate that you love as well, or that granola, or that great sandwich you love. PB&J is always great. So for climbing, of course, there's our essentials again. We've got helmet, climbing shoes, harness, of course, rope, rock protection, chalk, gloves, hat in case the weather changes. And again, these are basic examples of what could be additional season and sport specific. And the same premise here with backcountry skiing. What's important to note here for any of you who travel in the wintertime or shoulder seasons on the snow, of course, our essentials are there, top left. The next 3 essentials will definitely be your avalanche transceiver, shovel, and probe. and knowing how to use those pieces of gear. You've taken an AST, an avalanche skills training course. You know how to use them. You've practiced. You can practice with your transceiver in the summer. You can go to the beach and bury it in the sand, in a bag, of course. You can hide it in the couch and come through another room and see if you can just do search in the house. There's ways to keep up those skills and work on your training off season. So those are our 3 T's, which we'll recap as we come to a close. But before we do, I wanted to talk about what to do in an emergency. This is a big piece because accidents happen. And in British Columbia, we have 79 search and rescue groups, and there's 3,000 volunteers on those 79 groups. And every year there's approximately 1,900 search and rescue calls. So we know for a fact that incidents happen in our province and right across Canada. What you do in that emergency is really important and can really help reduce the severity of that call so that search and rescue volunteers can find you faster and find you in better condition. We want you to think about the stop analogy. When there's an emergency and you've stopped for a reason, someone's hurt, you're lost, you're injured, you've exceeded your abilities, and you need to now call for help. The first key point is to stop moving. So we're going to go through these S, T, O, and P, stop, think, observe, plan. And the first one here is by not moving, it allows search and rescue to locate you faster. If you keep moving, it's a cat and mouse game. It's very difficult. So take a moment to assess your situation. You've stopped for a reason, like I mentioned. Maybe someone's hurt, twisted an ankle. Maybe their blood sugar is low. Someone's nausea. For whatever reason, you have to stop. Are you just lost? Can you just reorientate yourself and get back on track? So you're staying in a safe location, but you stopped. Now you're thinking, how will I contact search and rescue? I love the answers to these questions because we've already gone over it and we know the answers here. You've left a detailed trip plan with a trusted emergency contact. So there's part of your communication with search and rescue. Another means of communication is through a communications device. InReach, Zoleo, or Spot. These are other communication devices other than your phone, and those are your primary pieces, and your phone is your secondary piece of communication. So you'll be able to contact search and rescue through many ways. Through your comms device, your trip plan has initiated something if it's got to that point, and only if you have reception for your phone, you can use your phone. Will anyone know you're missing? Absolutely, because you've left that detail with your contact. You've left information via some form of a trip plan. Will anyone know where you are? Again, yes, it's in the plan. You've either texted someone, called, left it in detail, a sticky note on the fridge, you've left it on the kitchen counter, or you've used our app, which we'll talk about in a second. When should you call? That one's easy, ASAP. There's no delay. There's no number of hours that you need to think about or wait. As soon as you think you need help, you should call. And again, that number is 911. It doesn't change. There's not a search and rescue number. There's not an emergency number other than 911. We all get taught that when we're young, and that's how you reach search and rescue as well. So you should call that as soon as possible. And the reason for that is it initiates the search and rescue through 911, through the local police department. Then they can gather, page, and communicate with their STAR volunteers so that they can leave their family and friends and whatever they're at to then muster, gather, assess, and reach the area where they start to set up a station to then think about how they'll get to you safely. So all of that takes time. That's Cole's Notes version of that. All of that takes time. So the sooner that you can call for help, the better. Are you prepared to treat a medical emergency? That goes back to our training piece of first aid. So hopefully, yes, there. And do you have the essentials to keep warm and dry? You've packed all of your essentials. Now it's time to put on those layers and start to regulate your body temperature. And again, 911 if you need help, phone as soon as you can, and search and rescue is free of charge. A little comparison here before we move on to the next piece in relation to communications. And this is why we talk about our cell phones are not our primary means of communication. We take them. I know you will. I do. You travel with it in airplane mode. That will save battery as well. And also travel with it off. if you want to and really save the battery, carry an extra battery pack. And you know, again, that's your secondary means of communication. The idea that we have other means of communication is so that we can get out clearly. So let's look at Alberta for a second. We've got this nice purpley mauve color. That's where there is clear communication. Let's come back to British Columbia. There's not as much of that color. You can see corridors and little bands where we do have that same mauve purpley color where there is reception, but there's a lot of our province that there isn't. So having that other means of communication, leaving that trip plan with a trusted contact, detailed plan, letting people know where you're at and what you're doing is critical to your safety and communication if you need it. Observations here, you're looking around if there's any immediate hazards. Are you close to a cliff, a rock fall? In the wintertime, are you below a cornice? Are you above and on a cornice, which is overhanging snow that might drop? Are you in a safe area where you can wait? So assess any hazards or dangers in the area. Look around to see if it's safe and you can make a shelter here. You might have to wait a little while, hours possibly, for search and rescue, possibly in the night, depending on what time you phone, depending on when they can get to you, if they can reach you, depending on the daylight as well for them. So you need to make sure it's safe here to make shelter. And then only if you can, from where you are, see a clearing close to you, that's where you would place yourself so that if a helicopter came over or an aircraft, you could signal, and that's where you would be easier to spot from above. Now let's talk about the planning piece. You've got your essentials in your pack. You've packed them all in there. You've brought your extra seasonal and sport-specific gear. Now you can plan and how to really react to this emergency, using your essentials to build that shelter, building a fire if you can manage it safely, and you've got the means to do so. And you're putting on those layers and you're getting warm to regulate, or venting if you need to, if you're overheating. The average response time for search and rescue, as some calls are very short and some calls are very long, but the average is 8 hours. So let's say you called in for help at about 8 o'clock on a summer evening, sun's not set yet, but that's when you called for help as the first effort to make contact. You might be waiting at least 8 hours for search and rescue, which takes you into the evening. And then there's a factor of the evening time for search and rescue to reach you. Is it safe for them to do so? They come in once it's safe for them after they assess their hazards. So that time waiting could be long. So you're making yourself comfortable, warm and dry, fed, hydrated, sheltered, and making it a safe space to wait until search and rescue finds you. Clothing is important. Having this layering system is critical. Layering up 3 layers is perfect. That base layer is a synthetic material and it's close to your body, so it can wick away that moisture and it dries really fast. That base layer is never, ever cotton. It gets wet and it stays wet. And then it wicks away the heat from you and it keeps you cold, actually. So synthetic material, wool, merino wool, those are better off suited. That mid layer is also a synthetic. It's a puffy. It's that mid layer that keeps you warm. It could be wool as well. The idea is that you're layering up, and then that outer layer is synthetic. Gore-Tex is going to protect you from wind, sleet, snow, rain, everything. And often they have pit zips that you can air out. Those 3 layers will help you keep warm or cool down. Fire, make sure you're able to start one, manage it, and put it out safely with the fire starting kit that you've got in your pack. This can go back to training, this can go back to gear, keeping it under control and keeping it burning either for food or for first aid, or it does a lot for our mental well-being to be around a fire as well, but only if you can do it safely. And here's an excellent example of a shelter. There's a lean-to, 2 of the emergency shelters that we also provide when you see us in person out and about in the community. One is a backdrop reflecting that heat. One is on the ground there to either lay on or sit. Awesome lean-to built up against the tree. To me, that looks like someone's taken a bushcraft course and they've learned that, or someone's taught them. They've been mentored quite well to create a wonderful shelter. This is the view from a helicopter looking down towards the forest. And you can see how green, of course, it is in this picture, and how we would really want you to be in a contrasting color. So this is the view for a search and rescue volunteer looking out and over into the forest as they're looking to spot you. So you need to think in the eyes of a SAR volunteer, and how big can you get? What is the contrast you can offer? So when we're shopping at the outdoor stores, we're looking for bright colors or pack covers that show a bright color as well. We need to leave clues, be seen and be heard. Our emergency whistle is usually on the tab of our coat or on the shoulder strap of our pack. You want to blast that 3 times in a row, take a break, 3 times in a row, take a break, emergency signal for help. So that's a great one to be heard. But this is what it looks like for SAR volunteers when they're looking for you from above. So you can think about this when and if you're in this situation, but think about it as you shop and prepare for your activity so that you can be as obvious as possible. And as we conclude and come to the close, this is our second last slide. Let's just wrap up again and go over. So we've got trip planning. That's a great way to leave information with friends or family. And you can do that in many ways. We gave you an example of a text, note on the fridge, any information transferred over. We're going to talk about our app in the next slide, which is an easy way and a free way to leave a trip plan. The training is critical so that you're prepared for the activity that you choose to do, certification-based, mentorship, take a course. It's great fun. And then taking those essentials with you and adding season and sport-specific gear. As we wrap up and come to a close, don't hesitate to connect with us on social media. There's our handles. It's all the same for Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We've got great updates over there. Trip Plan Tuesday in the summertime and all year long. Winter campaigns that come out throughout our social channels as well. Training opportunities if you'd like to be a volunteer educator with us. Feel free to check us out there. We have all of our events listed at the BC AdventureSmart Facebook events page as well. And now if you'd like to download the AdventureSmart Trip Plan app, I talked about trip planning a lot today. This is an easy way to have a tool that can help you. You can go to your phone and go to the camera mode, scan the QR as most of us are familiar with, and that will download, give you access to download the AdventureSmart Trip Plan app. And that app is, anyone can use that in Canada, free of charge. And it prompts you through all of the details of where you should be leaving information, how, sending it off to emergency contact. You can notify them, you can notify yourself, and it's an awesome, awesome tool that we're proud to offer you. And hopefully you use that as one of your tools for safety. There we go. That's our Survive Outside program. Thank you for joining us today with BC AdventureSmart. If you have any questions for us, don't hesitate to get in touch. You can DM us at any of our socials, or you can contact us at info@adventuresmartbc.ca. On behalf of our team at BC AdventureSmart, thank you, and enjoy your safe adventures out there. Take care. Bye-bye.